Well, welcome back, everybody. Barry Jones with SP History, and we are moving on to episode 7 in the Malcolm X journey. And here we are, 7 episodes in, or 6 episodes complete, and we are not yet to the assassination. And today we will get right up to the threshold of it. So I think by the time we get to episode 8, we'll be starting to talk about the assassination itself. But what we have learned to this point is that Malcolm X has become a wanted man, not just here in America, but from an international perspective as well. He's transitioned from a local civil rights leader here in the States to an international leader of an international human rights advocate. He's transitioned from being a leader of a movement in Harlem and LA and Philly and Detroit and places like the urban areas in the United States to cobbling together an international coalition of Black people in Africa, Black people in America, all across the Western Hemisphere. He has transitioned from being a person who criticizes racism in local matters and symptoms whereby white policemen beat up Black people on the streets to now criticizing the causes, the root causes of international racism and human rights abuses, which he, of course, identifies as capitalism. In so many ways, Malcolm X has become a threat to not just the Nation of Islam, right? Because now he's teaching unity and brotherhood across racial boundaries. He's not teaching the extermination of the white race anymore. So he's more than become an enemy to the Nation of Islam, but because of his anti-capitalist message and because he's drawn attention to the hypocrisy in America that it's not got its racial relations house in order. And it's embarrassing as he goes around the world airing America's dirty laundry as he uh, allies himself with socialist revolutions and socialist revolutionaries around the world, he is quickly becoming an enemy to the United States government. So what I want to do in episode 7 today is take you on a little timeline. And I've kind of organized this chronologically, this entire series. But I want to take you on a little timeline journey in this final year or a little less than a year leading up to his assassination. What happens when? And you can just see the buildup. And if you just follow the events themselves, you can you can see what's coming. So that's what we're going to be doing today in episode 7. Um, and what you're going to also notice, I hope, as we get closer to the event, and then as we get into the investigation afterwards, you're going to really see it. The involvement of the FBI, the involvement of the United States government in pushing the right buttons. One of the things I've learned in my study of the JFK assassination, the RFK assassination, the MLK assassinations, the United States government's smart, and they find button men. They find people who will do their dirty work for them, right? They in their lead up to the JFK assassination, if you remember, they were trying originally to assassinate Fidel Castro, and they went into partnership with the mob and the Cuban refugees, and they became their button men. They became the folks who did all the dirty work, the heavy lifting, so that the CIA always had plausible deniability, so that the United States government, the FBI, had plausible deniability. But they were all working together. They all had their separate roles, but they were all working together to achieve the same goal. You get to RFK, and the CIA uses button men. They find people in the LA Police Department. They find people. Uh, One of them was their own thing, Eugene Caesar, right? And they find people to do the dirty work for them. MLK was a Dixie Mafia. And here we are, Malcolm X, and the government's gonna find button men, and it's going to be the Nation of Islam, the Black Muslims that have a very public grievance with Malcolm X. So motive is not going to be an issue. That's already been that's already one of those deliverables that they can offer up to the American people. Uh, a plausible explanation as to how Malcolm X died. What's left unsaid is all the buttons that the government pushed to make that happen, to manipulate that result. So here are all my sources. I've gone through them each and every previous episode, so I won't rehash that. And we are continuing on with this theme that we started in episode 6, and that is of Malcolm X being a wanted man. I'm going to shrink my picture here a little bit. Okay. Uh, in August of 64, now this isn't the first trip he's made abroad, but in August of 64, he renews his international outreach traveling abroad. And in his words, actually, it's actually in the words of Professor James Small, who's quoting Malcolm X, that his purpose in this trip is to recruit allies. Now, he doesn't say it's to stay alive. He says it's to help with the cause. Professor James Small editorializes and says he's really recruiting allies to try to stay alive because he realizes the enemies, the very powerful enemies that he's making. Of course, instead of being given credit for trying to bring others into the fight for human rights, instead of being credit for trying to recruit others into the fight for civil rights, he's actually accused, mainly by his brothers, his black Muslim brothers in the African American community, of trying to create divisions between African Americans and Islamic countries, because he's a very divisive figure. And so they're calling attention to that, saying just your presence there is dividing the African Americans in the States from their brothers in these Islamic countries. So he doesn't get credit for this trip that he takes. Uh, in fact, he survives an assassination attempt in Cairo, Egypt. He's there for the purposes of an OAAU summit. Now, if you remember, we talked about the OAAU. This is an organization he started when he returned from his religious pilgrimage. And it's in contrast to everything else he's ever been a part of. He was a part of the Nation of Islam, which was an exclusive Black Muslim movement, which really kind of wanted to be exclusive. They didn't want to partner or form a brotherhood with Martin Luther King and the SCLC. They didn't agree with his approach. And so they were always kind of off to themselves. That's why we call it a splinter group. Then when he gets booted out of the Nation of Islam, he starts his Muslim mosque numbers incorporated there in New York. And it's just basically a rehash of the Nation of Islam. It's a replacement. And it has the same agenda as the Nation of Islam. It's just another splinter group. He's just splintered off from the original splinter group. Everything changes when he goes to Africa and the Middle East, comes back from Mecca, and realizes that his previous dispensations uh, were motivated from a place of hate and anger, desire for revenge, hostility, etc., etc. And he has a healing experience in Mecca, and it changes his whole mindset. Instead of viewing the white man as the enemy, instead of viewing other races as the enemy, he realizes that there are common ground areas where we can all work together. And he starts teaching a new message of unity and brotherhood and reaching across those racial divides, country divides, international boundaries, etc., to try to form a movement that is worldwide in scope, not just in Detroit and Harlem and LA. And so he starts this new organization called the Organization of uh, American Summit, Afro-American, I forget what the U stands for. Anyway, the point of it is to unite Africans from Africa with African Americans in Detroit and New York and LA and in a common purpose to try to advocate for human rights. So this is why he becomes such a big, he goes from a small leader of a splinter group to now a leader of an international movement. And of course, he's taken this message around to all these different world leaders in these countries as he makes one visit to Africa, two visits to Africa, three visits to Africa, four visits to Africa. Every time he goes, he's going with this new message and they're receiving it and they're treating him like a diplomat. They're giving him all the red carpet treatment you would a diplomat or some sort of government figure in the United States. He's the de facto leader of this new international coalition. This is why he's exploded on the scene such that he has. Anyway, on one of these trips, he's in Egypt. He's actually dining with Abdel Nasser, the leader of Egypt, and he falls very sick. He gets violently ill after the meal, and they discover enough poison in his system. According to Maxwell Stanford, he had enough poison in his system to kill 10 men, and yet he survives. It's like it's almost like he had the hand of God's protection over him, and and well, I'm not sure why that. Okay, uh, and God spared his life because he had enough poison in his system to kill enough more than one person. He survives it, but he's severely weakened. But this is another indication of the position he finds himself in, which is that he has become public enemy number one. Here in America, it doesn't matter where he is, he's got the FBI in tow. Uh, the United States government is watching his every move. And this is indicative, I think, more so than before, where we've seen assassination attempts where somebody runs up to his car and tries to shoot him, or three cars attack their entourages going through the Boston Tunnel. Those are rather ham-fisted attempts to assassinate Malcolm X here in the States and can be attributed to ne'er-do-wells or malcontents in the Nation of Islam, right? You know, just by the way that the attempt played out. But now you get into a situation where he's meeting with a world leader in Egypt, dining at his table, and is poisoned at the table of this world leader over in Egypt. And it's very unlikely that the Nation of Islam had that kind of influence or that kind of reach or that kind of pull to be able to master plan an assassination attempt of that nature. You would have to somehow corrupt the cook, who is also cooking for the leader of Egypt. So he is Abdel Nasser's personal cook, or somebody in that kitchen, or somebody in the Egyptian government, right? Somebody close to Abdel Nasser would have to be involved in this assassination plot. And it raises the stakes to if you are an observer of these assassination attempts, it makes you think that there is a governmental influence involved in this. Some government was involved in this attempt to be able to get the access, uh, to the inner circle of Abdel Nasser's uh, personal cook, kitchen, dining area, dining staff, maybe even bodyguards, whatever. Somebody high up, way above the pay grade of a Nation of Islam member. So you start to see the assassination attempts are still happening, but now they're happening in different ways, and they're indicating different enemies, different threat levels. Anyway, the plotters in Egypt were never found, but this is, as I said, the first indication that a plot against Malcolm X is bigger than anything Nation of Islam could carry out. So this kind of indicates that the enemies that Malcolm X has made since he returned from his pilgrimage to Mecca are much more dangerous to him than the Nation of Islam ever was. In December of 64, when Che Guevara came to New York to address the UN, Malcolm invited him down to the Audubon Ballroom to speak at an OAAU meeting. And initially, Che Guevara accepted and agreed to come, but then after reconsideration, he later sends a letter to Malcolm, says that out of concerns about the security conditions, I'm gonna have to pass. He says, quote, security conditions are not good for my participation in this meeting. In other words, his entourage or his bodyguards or whoever is responsible for the security of Che Guevara has looked at how he would have been protected at the Audubon Ballroom and realized, my God, this is a security nightmare. We can't protect you down there. So, and Che Guevara at this time is one of the most wanted men in the world. And so he has to decline the invitation. But he sends a greeting. He says, read this to the people when you speak. And the greet, and so Malcolm X did. It said, quote, receive the warm salutations of the Cuban people, especially those of Fidel, who remembers enthusiastically his visit to Harlem a few years ago. United, we will win. This is just more evidence of a relationship between Malcolm X and the Cuban revolutionaries, Fidel and Che Guevara. It's also a little bit of a warning sign. It should have been anyway, to Malcolm X and his supporters, that Audubon Ballroom isn't a safe place. If it's not safe for Che Guevara to speak there, we all know the enemies that he had. It's probably not safe for Malcolm X either, because we all know the enemies that he's made. And if Che Guevara has done his homework and realized that this wouldn't be safe place for him to speak, Malcolm X would be wise, and his OAAU organization would be wise to make the same determination, but they don't, unfortunately. But it's not like they weren't warned. Che Guevara uh, essentially gave them fair warning. Same month, December 64, this is the same letter that Malcolm X is reading to his supporters at the OAAU meeting, the Audubon. These are continuing words of Che Guevara. He says, quote, actually, this is Malcolm X to the letter as he's talking to his people. He says, quote, I love a revolutionary. And one of the most revolutionary men in this country right now was going to come out here, but he thought better of it. And he continues on. He cautions his members, his participants, don't let anyone choose your friends for you. This is almost like he's telling his audience, the reason I have a relationship with somebody like Che Guevara, the reason I have a relationship with somebody like Fidel Castro is because they're a revolutionary. And because I don't let people choose my friends for me. And so he warns them, don't you do it. He says, I don't, and you shouldn't. You and I should practice the habit of weighing people and weighing situations and weighing groups and weighing governments for ourselves. In other words, think for yourself. And don't buy into all this this narrative that comes from Washington about Che Guevara and Fidel Castro. That's all prejudicial material designed to create a boogeyman. American people will support a war against Cuba. He didn't say all that, but that's what he's essentially saying. And, so you kind of see in Malcolm X's own words, as time goes on, he's coming out of the closet, so to speak, and he's owning up to his new friends. And he's actually recommending to his membership that they reconsider who they feel are their friends and supporters. Think twice about it. Don't just accept what the government tells you about people. Don't just accept what other people tell you about other people. Make your own judgments. And it says that's what I've done. And I have found that these revolutionaries are more in line with the positions that I have adopted than my own country, than my own government. And he says, I love a revolutionary. And of course, we've already established the fact that he has made the decision that capitalism is the root cause of most of the human rights abuses that take place around the world, which includes all civil rights abuses. And so his target, his enemy is capitalism and any country that practices that system. And all of these, what he's noticed is that most of these new revolutionaries and these revolutionaries are socialist in nature. So he has become, by this point, I think it's fair to say, a socialist himself. And he's advocating socialist revolution by allying himself with these socialist revolutions and these socialist revolutionaries. He's become one of them. And so that's a pretty dangerous place to be. You think about, I'm down here in Louisiana right now, and one of the most prominent socialists in our country, uh, back during, the 30s and 40s, when you're talking about FDR, the time was Huey P. Long. And boy, he was an avowed socialist. He was the guy that's every man a king, right? Want to make every man a king, put a chicken in everybody's pot. And he was against, he wanted to tax the rich. He wanted to create down here in Louisiana a socialist utopia and then export that to Washington when he runs for president and transform America into a socialist utopia. And of course, he was the king of it, right? And what happened to him? You know, it's dangerous to come out as a socialist in America. He ended up being, he suffered an assassination attempt himself and eventually died of it, right? So you can go through American history and find people who glom onto socialism, especially back then in the I don't know if it's quite the issue anymore as it used to be. Bernie Sanders ran for president, and he basically ran as a socialist. He identifies with the Democrat Party, but he is a socialist for all intents and purposes. And he's sort of become a folk hero in this country. Maybe it's because he doesn't have a chance of winning. If he had a chance of winning, maybe we would see a different outcome. I don't know. I don't know what the threshold is for when you become a threat. But I think in Malcolm X's case, he's becoming such an international juggernaut, and he's identifying with America's enemies, especially Cuba, Fidel Castro, and Che Guevara, during a time which the Red Scare is in full effect. We're in the middle of the Cold War. The American people have been led to believe the Soviets are the boogeyman, and they're intent on conquering the world, et cetera, et cetera. We've got to stop them. We're the only thing stopping them from world domination, et cetera, et cetera. Now they're 90 miles off our coast. And now one of our own is allying himself. He's in league with our enemy. And he's openly espousing socialist ideas, et cetera, et cetera. I just think it's pretty clear that he's becoming a bigger and bigger threat by the day. In January 65, a month later, Malcolm X flew to LA to meet with Gladys Towles Roots. This is another woman that is left over from the Nation of Islam days. And this, in addition to the two secretaries who had already been identified and were filing paternity suits against Elijah Muhammad. So now he's going out to meet with Gladys Towles Roots to do the same. So he's kind of got some leftover business here from the Nation of Islam days. And this is, it's like two sides of Malcolm X. After his religious second conversion, all he talks about is unity and brotherhood and forgiveness and love and all that kind of stuff. But secretly on the side, he's still got this little war going with the Nation of Islam, which I find pretty fascinating. 6 months after the Cairo attack, the attempted poisoning, uh, Malcolm X, this is February 9th, 1965, Malcolm X travels to Paris. And when he gets off the plane, the French authorities will not allow him to enter the country. They refuse him entry into France, which means he's got to get back on that plane and fly back. And again, this is indicative of interference at a governmental level. This is not anything the Nation of Islam could have arranged. Okay. So what we've seen on his last two international trips is an assassination attempt in Egypt while he's dining with the leader of Egypt, and now a refusal to be allowed entry into France from governmental authorities. There is something going on at a governmental level that is causing him problems in these foreign trips now. And it speaks to governmental interference from the United States. It doesn't speak to Nation of Islam harassment. They could not, they don't have this kind of pull, so to speak. So you start to see, you start to put all these in context, and you realize, okay, he's he's being hunted. He's this wanted man, and not just by the Nation of Islam anymore. He's a wanted man at the government level. And how high up, we don't know, but certainly at a level that has influence in these foreign countries. So he returns to the United States. He gets he's met at the Kennedy Airport by some of his supporters, and they drive him back to the city. According to witnesses that were in that car, as they're driving, Malcolm X told them, quote, "You know, I've come to realize that I made a mistake. I have found recently that my troubles are not from Chicago." Okay, so this is like an epiphany he's had after these two events, one in Egypt and now in Paris. He realizes this is not coming from the Nation of Islam. So the others in the car ask him, quote, "Where are these problems coming from then?" And Malcolm pointed the opposite direction and said, "From Washington." And then his advice to his supporters was, quote, "Leave the country, they're going to destroy you too." So in his mind, he has now identified where his issues are. It's not so much, I think this is one of the reasons why he was so careless when we get to February 21st in the Audubon Ballroom, because it was a local event uh, for his supporters and his organization. And if some Nation of Islam people happen to be there, so be it. Compared to what he's facing from Washington, they're a small threat. And I just think he trivial. I'm speaking from my own perspective here, but I could see where he could, in his mind, think, well, they're not much of a threat anymore. It's the big guy. It's the Washington I need to be concerned about, not realizing that they might be working together. So February 65, boy, this is a big moment right here. Martin Luther King is engaged in a march, a civil rights march down Selma, Alabama. And it was about voting rights. He said, "Our campaign here in Selma is to do a very simple yet important thing, namely to get the right to vote." During the march, because of the law enforcement presence, it turns into a riot. And MLK gets arrested along with all of his marchers. It's one of those shameful events that happen. You can see the newspaper clipping down there. Uh, they were attacked by the police with the billy clubs, with the water hoses, with the dogs, et cetera, et cetera. And it turns into a big bloody mess, which of course it works, plays right into the hands of Martin Luther King. This is what he wanted on the front pages: white man overreach, so that the sympathy goes to his movement. And he always maintains the moral high ground, right? Because they don't fight back. They're nonviolent. So guess who shows up? Malcolm X goes down to Selma to support King. This is the unity. This is the brotherhood. And he tells Coretta Scott King, "I'm not here to foment any discontent. I'm here to provide support for your husband. I respect Dr. King. I want you to understand that my role is to be the left wing in this movement to frighten white America so that they will negotiate with Dr. King, good cop, bad cop, right? So if I'm working with Martin Luther King, they hate me so much and what I stand for that in the past, when they may have been hesitant to negotiate with Dr. King, they might be a little bit more open to when they consider what the alternative is. I'll be the alternative. I'll be the boogeyman. I'll be the bad guy. And your husband will be the good cop. Later, after MLK was released from jail, Malcolm X and MLK conducted a 2 hour, this is according to Maxwell Stanford, conducted a 2 hour conversation via phone, after which Martin Luther King sent his lawyer to Malcolm X's meetings on taking the United States before the UN on the charge of genocide against African Americans. Oh, so this is introducing a whole new level of intrigue. Malcolm X is communicating to Martin Luther King what his next step is, which is to go to the United Nations and charge the United States with genocide. And of course, to do this, he's going to have the cooperation of some of these African nations because he himself doesn't represent a country. He's not a UN diplomat and he doesn't speak for the United States. So this is going to have to be in league with these African nations, these leaders that he's been grooming and these relationships with, nurturing these relationships. And this is a way to bring attention to a cause, worldwide attention to a cause through an international body. Of course, this would be extremely damaging to the United States prestige and their opinion of it, its opinion of itself. And it would lay bare before the whole world the hypocrisy of the race relations in the United States. And that's the point. So it's sort of like it's, okay, I'm not going to appeal to the LAPD anymore. I'm not going to appeal to the United States Supreme Court anymore, to the president or the governor, to the mayor. Forget, I'm going over everybody's head. I'm going to the United Nations. I'm going to the United Nations. I'm going over all y'all's heads. So charging the United States government with genocide would have just been a catastrophe for America's their image. But because Malcolm has smartly cultivated these relationships with African governments, he is able to organize their UN delegations. He can't go before the UN and propose this or make this accusation, but they can. And he gets them all. This is the unity and brotherhood. This is him saying, if we work together, we can move the ball down the field. And so he has talked them. He's gone over there four times now, and he's united them behind this proposal. According to Peter Bailey, the proposal was, in essence, quote, if the United States has the right to invade the Congo to save these white nuns, then who's to say that we don't have the right to militarily assist the African Americans in Mississippi who are being killed? That's the argument that these African countries are going to go to the UN and make. You come in and meddle in our affairs, and you have this pretext about saving white nuns. If that's good for you, why can't we come to your country, Mississippi, and meddle in your affairs? And our pretext will be these Mississippians that are being harassed and killed by your government. You see where this is going? I mean, you talk about audacious. And of course, this white nun story, just to kind of rehash, this is the United States has been interfering in the Congo for years. And we're in 65 now, but this picture of Kennedy is after the assassination that the United States participated in, actually through extraordinary rendition helped plan and carry out the assassination of Patrice Lumumba. Patrice Lumumba was the Congolese leader that was advocating for the Congo people to control their own resources, to have sovereignty over their own country, and to kick the white man out, to kick the United States out. They're always coming in, meddling in their affairs because they've got gold, they've got silver, they've got all these natural resources the Americans want to take. The Americans are always finding these reasons to meddle in the affairs of the Congo government. And Here comes this leader saying, no, let the natural resources of the Congo belong to the Congolese people. And of course, it wasn't just America, it was other imperialist countries as well. And he's trying to keep them out. And so he becomes a threat. And we assassinated him. This is a very famous picture of JFK. It happens while JFK is president. And he didn't order it. He found out about it, but he didn't order it. And when he found out about it, he was dismayed. You could see the response there. He's like, "Oh my God, we did this," and he was ashamed. He was horrified to find this out, what our CIA was up to. But because Lumumba advocated and was a strong voice for the Congolese people against the intervention of the United States and the meddling of their affairs, all these other imperialist countries, he became a threat. They took him out. And they've been meddling in their affairs ever since. And one of the pretexts was this white nun story, which they said these white nuns were being harassed and coming under persecution, and we needed to go in and save these white nuns. We needed to militarily interfere. Really, it was about the mineral deposits, especially the gold in the Congo. So it's just a pretext. The whole white nun story turned out to be a total fabrication. It was a pretext. It's a cover story. And so this is what he's referring to in this. Go back. If the United States has the right to interfere in the Congo to allegedly save these white nuns, then who's to say we don't have the right to militarily assist the African Americans in Mississippi who are being killed by the U.S. government? So it's born out of a historic event that actually happened. And they're saying what's good for the goose should be good for the gander. And of course, none of this would be taking place if Malcolm X had not gone over and developed his relationships with these leaders in these African countries and gotten them to trust him to the extent that they did and gotten them on board with this brotherhood approach, this alliance. Let's all speak with one voice and let's go to the United Nations, go over the heads of the United States government. Let's go to the United Nations and let's charge Americans with genocide. And we'll claim as our mandate something that actually happened historically when the U.S. interfered in the Congo and say, if it's okay for them, it should be okay for us. This is the plan. And so this is the conversation that the two preeminent civil rights icons in America in 1965 are having. It's a conversation between Malcolm X and Martin Luther King, and now they're talking about bringing their forces together. This was always the fear of J. Edgar Hoover. As long as we keep these folks separated and splintered, their effectiveness is neutralized. If there's ever a Black Messiah that can bring these disparate groups together, we have a problem. That's the Black Messiah that we've got to prevent from happening. Not only is Malcolm X bringing together civil rights organizations in here in the United States, but he's reached across and he's got foreign governments working with him. In other words, the FBI is looking at Malcolm X and saying, we have ourselves a problem. This guy is a threat. Not only is he a threat to become the Black Messiah, he's become it right in front of our eyes. He's unifying these foreign countries with the African Americans here at home. He's unifying African American civil rights groups here at home together. He's coalescing. All these movements are starting to come together as one. And their reach and their influence is exponentially greater than they were before when they were all splintered. And who's the cause of all this? It's Malcolm X. That's why he gets taken out first in 65. 3 years later, it'll be Martin Luther King. They'll take him out as well because he'll rise to that level. But it's Malcolm X that is driving this train. When you take him out of this equation, there's no UN proposal from these African countries that they're not even on the same team in Africa, much less working together on behalf with an American to make this a proposal before the UN. It's Malcolm X who's driving this train. He has become, right in front of their eyes, this Black Messiah they were so afraid of. With the recent merging of Martin Luther King and Malcolm X, quote, according to Abdul Rahman Muhammad, quote, the FBI saw Malcolm X's ability to indict America and be able to mainstream that indictment as far more dangerous to the stability and safety of the U.S. than he ever was when he was in the nation. That was my point yesterday in episode 6. When he was in the Nation of Islam, he had a little bitty reach. He could always be discredited as some extremist, as part of some far, you know, extremist organization, a splinter group, civil rights organization. And he was the number two, so anything he said could be vetoed by the number one, Elijah Muhammad. So he had a little bitty influence. Since he's been kicked out of that, what appeared to be his greatest defeat has become his greatest victory because now he's gone on to bigger and better things and he's bringing countries of Africa into the fold. He's bringing revolutionary movements down in Cuba and Latin America into the fold. He's bringing the African American civil rights movement in America into the fold, Martin Luther King. He's creating this monolithic organization movement that is not national, it is international. In other words, he's become the Black Messiah. Just that quick. Sean King, an activist, quote, Malcolm was becoming a cult figure in the country. People wanting to invite him to come and speak in Mississippi and Alabama and Los Angeles. People wanting to invite him to Harvard and Yale and Cambridge. So you see there across the racial divide, he was becoming a figure that transcended the bubble of the Nation of Islam. The Nation of Islam attracted urban blacks, former incarcerated inmate types. Malcolm X now, since his freedom from his independence from the Nation of Islam, is now being invited still into those urban areas, but now also into the cultural elites centers of America, Harvard, Yale, Cambridge. He's transcending that bubble, no longer an urban bomb thrower. Now he's seen as an intellectual leader of an international movement that meets with kings and princes and queens overseas. So this is the new Malcolm Islam that the U.S. government fears. They didn't fear him before. David Garrow, the expert on the FBI, said, quote, the real threat to Elijah Muhammad and the nation was that as soon as Malcolm X had an independent pedestal, position, stature, etc., people all across Black America would flock to put Malcolm's banner and abandon Elijah and the nation. They're realizing too little, too late that they made a mistake because Malcolm X, whom they thought would shrivel up and go away, is actually expanding before their eyes and swallowing up all the oxygen in the room. He is, especially as he meets with Martin Luther King now and forms an alliance there. Elijah Muhammad has become a bit player, the Nation of Islam, who, what? It's not, it's not in the fight anymore compared to where Malcolm X took this movement. So on all these different fronts, from the Black Messiah, the politics of the Black Messiah, the politics of the Civil Rights Movement, Malcolm X is expanding. And he's becoming, I've heard this expression about, I heard it the other day on the radio. It was a commentary. He's talking about Donald Trump. And he says some people, when they walk into a room, they have a presence about them. Everybody turns and they look. And he named a few people, and we can all think of folks who feel, who are that type of person. When they walk into a room, everybody turns and looks. And he said the difference is with Donald Trump, and this isn't my opinion, this is just what I heard. He said, Donald Trump is the room. These people walk in and their presence is such that people turn and look at him. Donald Trump is the room. And I think it was in relation to recently they had a big celebration in the Oval Office with the University of Florida men's basketball program because they won the national championship. And this guy who was observing this is a media member who is not been around Donald Trump very much, has not been to the White House. He's more of a sports reporter. But because of the occasion, the essence of the occasion, he got invited to be involved in this celebration. So he's in the Oval Office. And he says, I've been in all these different environments where people walk into the rooms and everybody turns and looks. I've never been in an environment before where the entire room is focused on one individual to the extent that they were with Donald Trump. He says he's he's not a presence like he said he's a presence unlike any other I've ever been around. He's he is the room. He's not a presence in the room. He is the room. That's what's happening with Malcolm X. He is no longer this controversial figure that people turn and look at and they whisper about. He's no longer this controversial figure that people turn and stare at with awe and admiration as he walks into the room. He's no longer someone that he, that sits at a dais with 10 other people and has an aura about him that rivals the other 10. He overshadows everybody. He is the room. He's becoming the room. And you got to think Elijah Muhammad is scratching his head at this point, wondering what happened. This was my guy. He was under my thumb. I kicked him out, and now he's become like no one asks about me anymore. He's he's bigger than me. So, from a civil rights perspective, you can see Elijah Muhammad has some issues now with this new Malcolm X. He says, Elijah Muhammad says, quote, Malcolm felt that he was now a big man before the public, and this seemed to have been his desire. He wanted to be seen, be heard. He wanted to exalt himself from his teachings. So that's his way of dealing with it. Well, this is just who he always was. He wants to be bigger than the messenger, the prophet, myself. And so this is why we had to kick him out because he was, he was getting too big for his britches, kind of a thing. But the thing of it is it's it's all of this experience that Malcolm X has gone through has contributed to this moment where he now finds himself. But it's the growth. It's the growth. It's the transition from dispensation 1 to 2 to 3, the healing experience that he had in Mecca, the realization that this is a worldwide movement. It's about human rights abuses. It's not just about civil rights abuses in Birmingham, Alabama. It's about human rights abuses going on worldwide. And if we link together instead of fighting these individual battles, these separate battles, instead of arguing for separation, instead of arguing for extinction of the white race. What if we worked together? What if we formed bonds of unity and brotherhood? What if we brought the blacks in Africa in league together with the blacks in America? What if we adopted some of the socialist revolutionary tactics? And what if we attacked the root cause, which is capitalism and greed? What if, all these things that Malcolm X intellectually, where he's worked his way through that process and arrived at a place where he can now argue his own message. He's using his own words. He's not repeating as a mouthpiece Elijah Muhammad's words. It's his own. And he still has the passion. He still has the intensity. But he's no longer motivated by anger and hate, which seems to be what motivates the entire Nation of Islam. He's grown past that. He's outgrown that movement. And he's become bigger than. On February 14th, 1965, this is Valentine's Day, it finally happens. Remember, they'd be getting the phone calls at home, we're going to bomb your house. 3 Molotov cocktails were thrown into Malcolm X's home while they were asleep. Just about killed him. You can see the damage it caused. They barely made it to safety. Malcolm X was literally in his underwear, handing his kids through the window to his wife outside. And it's like 6 degrees outside. February 14th is in Harlem. So New York's a cold state. So they're out there, and in the ensuing investigation, a whiskey bottle containing gasoline was found on a dresser. And this is an effort to implicate Malcolm X in a fire at his own house, right? Saying, well, they they had a whiskey bottle had gas in it. Somehow it got ignited. That's what caused the fire. So as to uh, eliminate any investigation into three Molotov cocktails getting thrown to the window. And according to Malcolm X, he says, we knew it didn't belong there. We don't have whiskey in our house. So pretty quickly, Malcolm X realizes, as far as the investigation is concerned, the fix is in. So this should have been a warning to Malcolm, and it was, to the extent to which people will go, his enemies will go to kill him. They don't care if they harm his family in the process, in the meantime. And boy, it really made an impact on Malcolm X. Uh, the suspicions that he had uh, was that the NYPD or the fire department, they were the ones first responders, right? They were first on the scene, had planted that evidence, that whiskey bottle full of gasoline, as a pretext to leak to the media that Malcolm X had firebombed his own house, try to get publicity or sympathy, whatever. Malcolm X was furious when he heard that. He says, you know what the temperature was? It was about 15 or 20. I stood in my underwear, bare feet, in the middle of my driveway with a gun in my hand for 45 minutes, waiting for the police or waiting for the fire. It took 45 minutes for them to get there. If I wanted to put on a show, I could have found a better way than that to put it on. And that's a picture, newspaper picture the day after him arriving at his home. You can see in the background there a police officer standing guard. So this is 1 week before the assassination. We're getting right up to, February 21st is D-Day. So here we are on February 14th. And we already have learned that this is the home that the Nation of Islam has won a court battle over evicting Malcolm X and his family from. He's still there. But now, as a result of the bombing, Malcolm X is literally homeless. He has no place to live, no place for his family. The damage to the house was pretty extensive, especially in the front rooms. It only had 5 rooms, the house itself. According to his personal secretary, Malcolm X had less than $150 to his name at this point. Remember, one of the beginning wedges between Malcolm X and Elijah Muhammad and the Nation of Islam was the fact that he learned that the reason the Nation of Islam didn't want to react to what happened in LA with Ronald Stokes is because he was trying to protect his nest egg. They had a lot of finances that were at stake, money, donations, business contracts, et cetera, et cetera. This unaccountable cash, this untaxed cash. They didn't want to jeopardize that. So what Malcolm X learns as a result of what happened in LA with Ronald Stokes was that Elijah Muhammad was motivated more by greed than he was by the cause. And that started this whole disillusionment between him and the nation, him and Elijah Muhammad. Okay? Now, fast forward to February 14, 1965. After this bombing leaves his family homeless, he has $150 to his name. It's pretty clear, even though he's become this international juggernaut, even though he's become this man who's this symbol of human rights advocacy, from an international standpoint, he's become a threat to the United States government, what he's advocating to the UN, that proposal to those African countries. He's become a threat to the United States government. He's become this black messiah to the civil rights movement. He's unified the world, the black world, the African world, at least when it comes to fighting for human rights. All these things he's achieved, and yet he still is a pauper. He's not translated any of that into cash. He's not tried to feather his own nest. He's not built up and he's not. Uh, so many people get caught up in greed, and it just neutralizes it, eliminates their effectiveness because greed overtakes the cause. That's what happened with Elijah Muhammad. It never happened with Malcolm X. He was a true believer to the day he died. $150 to his name, homeless. And, ironically, if you remember the story about his mom, when his daddy was killed, she couldn't collect on her life insurance policy because the court ruled that he had died as a result of suicide, which was preposterous. And that's why she went crazy. She had a nervous breakdown. Fast forward to February 14th, 1965, his house has just been bombed. In an effort to assassinate him, they almost killed his entire family, and he doesn't have a life insurance policy. He can't buy a life insurance policy because of the threats on his life, the constant threats on his life. No life insurance company will sell him a policy. So uh, I saw numerous instances of witnesses who were close to Malcolm X in his final days expressing his concern about what would happen to his family if he died. He pretty much made peace with the fact that he was going to die. What bothered him was how his family would support itself without a life insurance policy, without his ability to make a living. She didn't, she was a nurse, but he wouldn't be leaving them anything. And he knew that. And that was first and foremost on his mind at this point. His next speech that he gave, the first speech he gave after the bombing at his house was in Detroit. And according to Muriel Feelings, he was upset, as anyone would be in that situation. Saying, quote, he was really angry and said some things that incriminated the Nation of Islam, thinking it was the nation that had attacked his home where his wife and children were. He had come out of his home and and was handing his children through the windows in his underwear. And that had infuriated him. Now, it's interesting because he's just come back from an international trip whereby it was pretty clear somebody was targeting him or something was targeting him that was far higher, at a higher level than the Nation of Islam. Then he comes back to Harlem and he gets firebombed. And in his public comments afterwards, he blames the Nation of Islam. So put yourself in Malcolm X's shoes on February 14th, 1965. You don't know where the next threat is coming from. When you're driving down the road in LA, somebody runs out and tries to jerk open your car door and he's got a gun in his hand. When your entourage is going through the Boston Tunnel, they get attacked by 3 cars. When you're at home sleeping in your Harlem house, you get firebombed. When you go overseas and you're eating at the king's table in Egypt, you get poisoned. When you go to Paris to meet and have a meeting with the OAAU members there in Paris or in France, the government denies you entrance into the country. So if you're Malcolm X in real time, you don't know. Your head's got to be on just spinning. It's your head's on a swivel. You don't know where the next shot's coming from. You don't know where the next attempt is coming from. You don't know who. You came home from your Paris trip. You told everybody in the car, I think my bigger problems are not from Chicago, which is Nation of Islam. I think my bigger problems are Washington, D.C. And even Che Guevara, when invited to speak at your home turf auditorium, the Audubon Ballroom, where you did all your speaking, would not come and speak there because he said the security is so bad. So I think this is why he knew he wasn't long for this life. And he was concerned about his family. How would they support themselves after? But I think he was confused a little bit about who his enemies were. And I think he thought, well, it's the Nation of Islam, clearly. They're after me. But I think he suspected that people in Washington were pushing the buttons. And it just angered him to no end that his black Muslim brothers were being used in such a way by the by the government, to kill one of their own. To kill one of their own. This is one of the things that really came out in the research that Abdur Rahman or Rahman Muhammad, that was the upshot of his research, was that as a Muslim himself, it was disappointing for him to see the division within the Black Muslim movement to the extent that they would target one of their own in the way that they did and allow themselves to be used to target one of their own. That's even worse. It's one thing to come out and target one of your own and it be your idea. It's another thing when you get put up to do it by the very people, by the very entity, the United States government, that you proclaim to be fighting against because of their civil rights abuses or human rights abuses. You get used. That's even a little bit lower, I think. So anyway, that's where we are. As far as enemies are concerned, if you're Malcolm X on February 14th, 1965, you realize, okay, I know the Nation of Islam is after me because I betrayed Elijah Muhammad. Uh, I know the FBI is after me. According to um, several FBI informants, Malcolm X is in the category of a traitor who, in advocating black supremacy, is the same as plotting to overthrow the U.S. government. This is somebody we're going to get to know pretty well as we go forward. His name is Tony Bauza. He was working for the FBI in BOSSI, which is the Bureau of Special Services. And so the FBI is responding to the memo they were sent by their boss, Edgar Hoover, who says, do something about Malcolm X. Do something. And they have made the determination that he is in the category of a traitor who, in advocating black supremacy, is the same as plotting to overthrow the U.S. government. So they've made the determination he's a traitor. Just like the CIA made the determination JFK was a traitor. Right? And they were doing Americans a favor by getting rid of the traitor. BOSSI, which, as I indicated, was the Bureau of Special Services, trained by the FBI, part of the FBI. To them, Malcolm X represented a threat because he was agitating for radical change. And then NYPD Blue, NYPD, I always call him NYPD Blue. According to NYPD Detective Tony Bauza, and of course, who also worked for BOSSI, they cynically offered Malcolm X security knowing he would decline it. This was on purpose. According to Tony Bauza, in fact, he was the one who offered it. He knew Malcolm X. They had a personal relationship. They knew each other by first name. He offered Malcolm X NYPD security, knowing that Malcolm X would decline it, and then he could document that, and it would afford the NYPD plausible deniability of having any role in the assassination of Malcolm X. This was all part of the setup. So you have some pretty powerful enemies by this point. February 14th, 1965. You know the Nation of Islam's after you. FBI, which includes BOSSI and NYPD, is after you. And they're all going to be involved in the setup a week later in the assassination of the Audubon Ballroom. And we'll get to that in the next episode. So that's where we leave it. 1 week before the assassination, Malcolm X has become an international sensation. And in doing so, he's become a threat. Why? Because he's challenging the system. What's the system? Capitalism. What's the system? Democracy. In both cases, he's advocating for socialism. And he's in league with some of our so-called boogeymen, including Fidel Castro and Che Guevara. He's got the African nations to agree to go to the UN, charge the American government with genocide. This is all happening at the same time. And so you take Malcolm X out of the equation, all that unity and brotherhood, and it falls apart. All this coalition falls apart. He's the guy, he's the glue. He's the guy holding it all together. He's the one that proposed everything. He's the one. He's the Black Messiah. He's the one bringing all these disparate splinter groups together. And he's the one that's taken a national movement and turned it into an international movement, embarrassing the United States, airing our dirty laundry before the world, threatening to this proposal at the UN that would be catastrophic for the US image around the world. And so it's pretty clear he has become everything J. Edgar Hoover was afraid of, and something, in his own words, in J. Edgar Hoover's own words, something needed to be done. Do something about Malcolm X. 1 week later, 1 week from now, they will do something about Malcolm X. Okay, that's episode 7. Um, Apologize if it was a little bit uh, chaotic. I don't know if my mic picked this up or not, but I've got a guy in the next room who was holding some sort of a meeting, and he's a loud talker, and I'm afraid you might hear him. I was trying to speak as loud as I could into my mic without disrupting everybody else. I'm in a public library, so I'll have to go back and listen to this and see if it's legible. But anyway, until next time, everybody have a great day. God bless. Thank you.